Right, good morning, everyone. It's 11 o'clock, so we're going to get started. Thank you so much for joining today's webinar. I'm Jess Tighe, Regulatory Projects Manager at the Advertising Standards Authority. And I'm really pleased to welcome so many of you to this session, which we are hosting jointly with colleagues from the MHRA and the General Pharmaceutical Council. Thank you for taking the time to be here. We know many of you are looking for practical guidance on how to advertise responsibly and comply with the rules in a really fast-moving and competitive sector. So our aim today is to provide that clarity and help support a level playing field for businesses. There are two important pieces of context for today's session. So first of all, the ASA has recently published consumer research on how people interpret ads relating to prescription-only weight loss medicines. And that research shows that public interest is, no surprise to any of you, I'm sure, exceptionally high, and that consumers may understand ads for weight loss services as promoting prescription medicines, even where those medicines are not explicitly named. And secondly, following the really recent licensing of the first oral GLP-1 medicine, the ASA, MHRA, and GPHC issued a joint warning to businesses promoting those newly licensed medicines. So today's session is intended to help clarify where the line is when promoting services where GLP-1s may be a potential outcome of a consultation, whether they be tablets or injections. And our focus is on making sure that advertising does not undermine the safeguards around prescription-only medicines and that people are not encouraged towards treatment without the right clinical context. So in terms of the agenda, we'll begin with my colleague, Andrew Bishop, who will take you through guidance on ASA guidance on advertising services that include weight management prescription medicines. And we'll then hear from our research lead, Cam Atwell, on some of the key findings from that recent consumer research. And we'll then be followed by colleagues from MHRA and GPHC. A couple of quick housekeeping points before I hand over. So the session is being recorded and it will be uploaded to the ASA website after the event, and we'll send you a link to it. We've set aside around 15 minutes at the end for questions, so please do start adding yours to the Q&A box throughout the session. We may not be able to answer every question and we can't provide guidance on specific ads today, but we will signpost further resources after the webinar so you know where to go for further support. So thank you again for joining us, and I will now hand over to Andrew to take us through the advertising rules and the key things to think about when preparing ads.
Yeah, morning everyone. I'm Andrew. I'm an investigations executive at the ASA and part of our medical specialist team. So as Jess has outlined, today we're focusing on the advertising of weight management services and GLP-1 medicines. So I'll talk you through the key advertising rules, highlight some of the most common compliance issues we're seeing, and use recent ASA rulings and enforcement work to show how the rules are applied in practice. So really the key principle to keep in mind is this. Providers can advertise legitimate healthcare services, consultations, and clinical support, but there is an important distinction between promoting access to healthcare services and promoting access to a POM. So throughout, we'll look at real-life examples to illustrate where advertisers have previously crossed a line, so you can take practical steps to ensure you advertise weight management services compliantly within the regulatory framework. So let's start with the ASA's remit. The ASA administers and enforces the rules set out by our sister organisation, the Committee of Advertising Practice, or CAP, across a wide range of media, including but not limited to online paid advertising and affiliate social media content, both of which we'll be covering in today's session. So as per UK law, prescription-only medicines cannot be advertised to the public, and this law is reflected in the code, which we'll come on to in a moment. The ASA works closely with other regulators and industry bodies, including the MHRA and GPHC, to ensure regulatory consistency, especially when it comes to advertising POMs. So due to the developments in this area, including the rate of incoming complaints, this issue has become a significant regulatory priority for the ASA. So now looking at the overarching rules. The starting point here is CAP Code Rule 12.12, which states that prescription-only medicines and prescription-only medical treatment must not be advertised to the public. The legal backing for this rule that I mentioned earlier comes from the HMRs, the UK Human Medicines Regulation 2012, which explicitly ban publishing ads that lead to the use of a POM. As I said, the focus should remain on clinical assessment, professional oversight, and patient suitability, and not shift to medicine availability, pricing, or access to specific POMs. When assessing ads, the ASA considers the overall impression created. Often, simply just removing a named medicine won't necessarily make an ad compliant if consumers are still being directed towards a prescription-only medicine or prescription-only treatment. It's also important to remember that the code prohibits marketing medicines before they have received an MHRA license. So that means advertisers should not promote pipeline medicines that are still undergoing regulatory review, even if they are generating significant media interest. Right, let's look at another code rule now. This one is on social responsibility. So alongside the medicine rules, advertisers must, of course, comply with the entire CAP code, including Rule 1.3, which requires marketing communications to be prepared with a sense of responsibility to consumers and to society. Advertising should not exploit insecurities around body image and be mindful to avoid creating pressure to lose weight, or suggest treatment is suitable for everyone, or encourage consumers to seek medicated treatment in a sort of time-pressured environment or situation. This is obviously particularly important when it comes to weight management advertising, because consumers may be vulnerable to messages that promote a quick fix or display transformational outcomes. So in the on-screen example, we considered the ad suggested a stigma associated with being the biggest person in the room, and therefore considered it exploited insecurities around body image. The ASA ruled that it was not necessarily the case that a person of this body size and shape shown would be unhealthy. Furthermore, by showing the model looking into the mirror, the ad emphasized physical appearance rather than health, and we concluded that the ad was irresponsible and therefore breached the code. So looking at more general rules in which ads can breach the code, general ways, our work has identified several recurring themes. I should run through them now and go into them in a bit more detail. So we've seen both direct promotion, such as naming prescription-only medicines in ads, and less direct or indirect promotion through imagery or wording strongly associated with POMs. So for example, injection pens, images of vials of medicine, or references to weight loss injections. Beyond the initial ad, consumer journey issues also arise on problematic landing pages, which can feature named POMs. Again, we'll come on to that more in a moment. We also see a lot of promotional tactics, such as discounts, limited time offers, affiliate arrangements. These can also create compliance concerns. So let's start with named weight loss POMs. Named prescription-only medicines should not appear in consumer-facing advertising at all, including on home pages or landing pages that link through from paid-for social media or search ads, for example. This rule extends to named branded drugs as well, so Wegovy, Mounjaro, or Ozempic. And our recently issued enforcement notice reminds advertisers that weight loss POMs cannot be promoted to the public. So moving on to less direct references. Recent ASA rulings demonstrate that is more than just a name POM, which can lead to a consumer requesting a POM. Advertisers need to consider potentially problematic wording, which may include references such as weight loss injections, or skinny jabs, or injection pen. You can see two case studies on the slide from upheld ASA rulings that assess that the claim weight loss injection or injections would be understood as a reference to a POM, and therefore promoted POMs to the public. Similarly, medicine-associated imagery can also be problematic. So images of injection pens or syringes, medicine vials have all featured in ASA rulings, depending on the context and the relation to weight loss advertising. Terminology as well, terminology such as we're now seeing GLP-1 tablets or oral GLP-1s. The new weight loss tablets may also contribute to the impression that prescription-only medicine is being promoted. So the key question we ask is simple. Will your ad likely lead to a consumer requesting a POM? If the answer is yes, it is likely to breach the rules. So moving on to unlicensed and newly licensed medicine, and on the licensing of pills, I'd like to highlight that it is not just references to injections or injection pens that can lead to an ad breaching the code. Although these medicines are new in the form of the pills, the advertising rules are not. They are still prescription-only medicines, and they cannot be advertised to the public. The recent ASA, MHRA, and GPHC joint warning reminds advertisers not to promote newly licensed oral GLP-1 meds or market pipeline products before they've been authorized. And this includes offering waiting lists for new or unauthorized products. The ASA hasn't yet published any rulings specifically on oral GLP-1s, although we've got a few underway, but the key principles we've discussed today apply just as much to tablets as they do to injections. So as before, the safest approach remains advertiser consultation or the clinical expertise and the healthcare service, not the medicine itself. Okay, let's look at a slightly more in-depth case study featuring a celebrity influencer. So this case involved a weight management provider and influencer Gemma Collins, and it demonstrates that not including a name POM doesn't necessarily remove the compliance risk. In the ad, Collins referred to using a weight loss app, medication, and discussed the fact that the treatment was also prescribed on the NHS. So at first glance, those references might appear relatively general, as no POM was named. However, when assessing the ad, the SA considered the wider context. The provider's website included links to media coverage of Gemma Collins' weight loss journey, and those articles contained references to GLP-1 weight loss injections. Taken together, we considered that consumers were likely to understand the advertising as referring to weight loss POMs. Following advice from the MHRA, who also expressed concern that consumers could be encouraged to request a POM as a result of the ad, including the publicity, the complaint was upheld by the ASA. Advertisers should consider the impression of their messaging and ask whether consumers are likely to take away a message about access to prescription-only medicines. Again, if the answer is yes, there's likely to be a risk under 12.12. So another area we have received a high number of complaints about and continue to monitor is affiliate marketing and referral activity. So this includes commission-based promotions from referral links, discount codes, and friends and family incentives. Where there is a commercial relationship or incentive, the content will almost certainly be considered a marketing communication. We have several ASA rulings on influencers and customers sharing referral links and discussing their treatment experiences on weight loss POMs in a way that breach the code. It's important to recognise that schemes which encourage people to share referral codes will always carry some degree of compliance risk. Advertisers should consider that risk carefully before operating one of these schemes, because they remain responsible for the CAP code and for the marketing communications produced on their behalf. So if you do operate or are considering operating one of these schemes, do make sure your terms and conditions are clear and that you actively enforce them, because your partners may be less familiar with the CAP code, and make sure they understand what they can and cannot say when they're promoting your service. So in short, if your affiliate breaks the rules and promotes a POM in a social media post, you might also be held responsible, even if you didn't actually press the post button yourselves. Right, looking at the consumer's journey. So it's worth noting that an ad which is compliant in terms of content cannot justify a non-compliant destination. It's important to treat a landing page as though it were a homepage for the purposes of ASA and MHRA compliance, and these cannot contain a name POM. We have ruled on ads that breached the 12.12 rule, as their landing page featured a name POM, despite having an additional step, such as an age gate or an options page, as per the examples on screen now. So try to consider what happens after the click. Does the landing page continue to focus on consultation and assessment or information about an illness, or is a medicine presented as the default outcome? If consumers arrive there directly from advertising, the content should not undermine the compliance of the original advert. advertisers remain jointly responsible for the overall impression created throughout the consumer journey, including the landing page and any subsequent pages following on from there. Right, now we're going to look at enforcement approach. So the ASA ENCAP's enforcement approach combines education, monitoring, intervention, and where necessary, enforcement. So alongside taking action where we identify breaches, we place a strong emphasis on engaging with the industry to help businesses get it right the first time. That includes working directly with pharmacies and weight management providers through training such as today's webinar, as well as engaging with trade bodies and publishing useful guidance for advertisers. In a fast-moving and evolving area such as this, formal rulings and giving advice to advertisers also plays an important part in setting precedent and helping advertisers understand where the regulatory boundaries lie. Alternatively, advertisers can be referred to the CAP compliance team, who can take various actions such as platform intervention or removal of paid advertising and enforce ongoing monitoring. As our recent joint warning on industry developments demonstrated, the ASA continues to work closely with both the MHRA and the GPHC on this matter. Together, we'll continue to monitor the market and assess complaints to ensure that all marketers can operate on a fair and level playing field. So to conclude, keep the focus on professional healthcare assessments, clinical expertise, and patient suitability, and not access to medicines. Avoid names, imagery, or wording that consumers are likely to interpret as references to prescription-only medicines, and review the whole consumer journey and not just the ad itself. To help provide greater clarity for the industry, regulators, and our own decision-making, the ASA commissioned some consumer research to better understand how people were interpreting these weight loss ads. So I'll now hand over to my colleague Cam from our research team, who will talk you through the key findings from that research and what they tell us about how consumers understand weight loss advertising.
Thanks, Andrew. So to understand how consumers interpret ads relating to prescription-only weight loss medicines, we conducted a mixed methodology research study at the end of last year. We started with a survey that gave us insights into awareness, usage, and attitudes around weight loss treatments. This was followed by 2 qualitative phases, a 5-day community with 30 participants where they were set various tasks and asked for feedback on ads, and 10 depth follow-on interviews, which allowed us to explore specific areas in more detail. In total, we tested 35 ads across the study, with 12 of those tested quantitatively in the survey. The survey provided important contextual findings. We found that the UK is a primed market for weight loss injections, and with only 20% of the population actively happy about the way their body looks. 9 in 10 claim to have made some sort of lifestyle change for weight loss purposes, such as reducing snacking or following a fad diet. And 42% claim to have used at least one of the weight loss methods or treatments we asked about. Awareness of weight loss injections is high and almost on par with more established methods such as diet programs and apps. 71% have either functional or high knowledge of weight loss injections, and the use of both medical terms and everyday colloquial language reflects the mainstream awareness of them. This familiarity has really been built through news and social media coverage, knowing someone who is using or has used them, or through research for personal use. And we know interest is high. 6% of the UK population have already used them, and a further 18% would consider using them in the future. Women, particularly those aged 45 to 64, are more likely to be unhappy with the way their body looks, are more familiar with and have greater knowledge of weight loss injections, and are more likely to have used them. 18 to 44-year-old women, postpartum and perimenopausal women are the most likely to consider using them in the future. We also found a split in attitudes towards access to and the use of injections. Many considered them restricted prescription-only medicines that should be a last resort, and professionally monitored, while others viewed their use more flexibly as a lifestyle tool that should be available to anyone who wants to lose weight. As mentioned, we tested 12 ads for our survey, with each respondent seeing one ad and then responding to a set of questions about it. On average, across all the ads tested, 10% of respondents spontaneously thought that the ad they saw is promoting a weight loss injection. At 18% and 22% respectively, those with greater knowledge of injections or current users were more likely to interpret the ads as promoting them. When prompted with a list of potential products or services being advertised, 29% mentioned weight loss injections. This rose to 41% amongst those with greater knowledge, and well over half of current users, who tend to have a wider pool of reference points to draw on and are able to therefore pick up on those potential signals in the ads. Weight loss pills, weight loss programs with lifestyle support, and diet programs were also mentioned, and those results can be found in the report. Looking at the individual ads tested, we see prompted attribution vary significantly, with between 9% and 69% thinking the ad they saw is promoting a weight loss injection. This variation is driven by signals consumers pick up on in the ads and how they interpret them. Using heat maps in the survey and through in-depth discussions in the qualitative stage, we explored these signals in detail. Cues that are more likely to be interpreted or picked up on as indicators of weight loss injections were grouped into 6 areas: imagery, language used, information about the product presented in the ad, claims around effectiveness of the product, the creative approach, and references to the provider. I'll go into detail on each of these, but it's important to point out that some indicators are stronger than others. And while it may be very clear what an ad focusing solely on an injector pen is promoting, interpretation is often based on multiple signals working together, the signals featured, how explicit they are, as well as the knowledge the individual has to draw on. The first signal relates to imagery, with injector pens being one of the most common indicators of weight loss injections. Pen imagery was central to the ad that was most likely to be interpreted as being for a weight loss injection. And heat maps from the survey, combined with findings from the qualitative phase, tell us very clearly this interpretation is driven by the prominent image of a pen. Variations of pens, such as ads featuring animated imagery of injections and pipettes, were also picked up on. Many also interpreted images of branded boxes, particularly when featured alongside other signals, as representing a physical product such as pills or injections. In some cases, current or prospect users recognize a certain style of box as likely to be for a weight loss injection based on experience or research. The second group of signals focuses on languages used in ads. Terms such as injection and jab, particularly after weight loss, are clear-cut and interpreted as promoting injections, while others such as GLP-1 are more likely to be picked up by those with greater knowledge. Weight loss medication is also widely understood, narrowing down interpretations to being either related to an injection or pill. The interpretation of treatment and the word program varies and is generally expected to involve a combination of methods that may be bespoke to users. Like other language signals, the extent to which program is thought to indicate weight loss injections depends on other signals present. Specific information featured in ads, such as references to pricing, news stories about price rises, words such as food noise or BMI, and references to regular deliveries are noted by many, particularly those with greater knowledge, as they're more attuned to those pointers. References to eligibility criteria or consultations tends to suggest some professional input, but not always interpreted as being related to weight loss injections. Claims around effectiveness are another important signal. Across all knowledge levels, consumers interpret claims of significant and/or rapid weight loss as a signal of injections. or even more invasive procedures such as a gastric band, because they recognize these levels of weight loss are unlikely to be achieved through diet or exercise alone. Some think clinical feeling ads, such as those using medical language or simple blue pharma imagery, are likely to be promoting weight loss injections. Others think holistic programs, ads for which might be less formal and, for example, include customer testimonials, may include injections as part of a wider weight loss program. The interpretation tends to be formed by the individual's attitudes around whether weight loss injections are a last resort that should be professionally administered and monitored, or whether they are seen as a lifestyle tool that should be accessible to anyone. And finally, those with greater knowledge are more likely to pick up on the names of providers. When asked what they think the ad they saw is getting them to do, on average, 44% think it's encouraging them to purchase the product or service being promoted. Again, this varied by individual ad, depending on the signals present. Interpretation that the ad is encouraging a purchase tends to be driven by references to price, large numbers of customers, and transactional language. Checking eligibility is a less common takeaway. A fifth feel the ad is encouraging them to talk to a healthcare professional about the suitability of a service. Looking at attitudes more generally, we found 7 in 10 think the product they saw, the product in the ad they saw is widely available. Similar proportions also feel ads for weight loss treatments put pressure on people, particularly vulnerable groups, to lose weight. Women tend to be identified as the likely target group for many of the ads tested. Portrayals of certain situations do resonate with women, such as featuring real overweight women or expressing relatable feelings and situations like that of a busy mum. But some take issue with how weight loss is positioned and targeted, such as references to obesity treatment or talk of discreet access or packaging. And less than half of the UK population is aware that GLP-1s are prescription-only medicines, with the perceived ease of accessibility suggesting clinical approval isn't necessary. And while over a third were unaware of restrictions on advertising prescription-only medicines, when explored in more detail, the majority understood the reasons for this. That's a quick overview of the research. I'll now hand over to Claire from the MHRA's advertising team, who's going to discuss their approach to advertising in this sector.
Thank you, Cam. And good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here today on behalf of the MHRA to talk about promoting a treatment service in weight management. I'd like to begin by highlighting the broad definition. Sorry, I'm just going to try and get my slide to move on. Highlighting the broad definition of an advertisement for a medicinal product, which is anything designed to promote the sale, supply, or use of a medicinal product. And within thinking about design to promote, there are 3 constructs that we can think about. The method of distribution to the intended audience, whether the wording used is persuasive and designed to persuade, and importantly, the effect of the messages on an average, well-informed consumer. And we've heard from Cam very clearly there, the unique resonance that some of these messages are having with members of the public at the moment. And leading on from that research, and as Andrew has said, importantly, a medicinal product does not need to be specifically named in order to be promoted. So within that very broad scope, a range of requirements apply. And 2 of particular focus today are the publication to the public of an advertisement likely to lead to the use of a prescription-only medicine, and the promotion of a medicine before a UK marketing authorisation is in force. And simply, if you are providing a service to the public that may lead to the supply of a prescription-only medicine after a consultation, the message, as stated by Andrew, is simple: to simply focus on promoting your service or your consultation. The consultation is the most suitable way to determine the most appropriate treatment for an individual. Now, of course, further information is provided in the MHRA Blue Guide, as many of you know, as is our role on behalf of health ministers to protect public health. And the process by which we do that is outlined in the Blue Guide, and the measures available to us. There are two important particular aspects of what's outlined in the Blue Guide that I'd like to outline as principles today, which is the importance of regulatory partnerships and the importance of three regulators being here together today to illustrate to you the importance of public protection in this particular space at the moment. The second principle I'd like to highlight is that the law defines a person. So everybody and anybody who is issuing material and creating content has a responsibility to follow the rules. So it's really important that everyone within your business follows the guidance, particularly those if you have a commercial relationship with any third parties. Patience and the reputation of your business depend on this principle. So just moving on to talk about the key concern about issuing content to the public that's likely to lead to the use of a prescription medicine. If we return to thinking about those three elements behind the design of material. Now, this is a very busy space for us at the moment. It forms the vast majority of concerns and complaints that are coming into the agency. And we have frequent concerns raised about the same range of providers as well, which we're monitoring very closely. There's some important examples to show you about the design of such content. One I've illustrated here on the right-hand side is a trend of indirect promotion, which is here using a licensed pharmacy medicine to seed messages that consumers would understand to be about newer prescription medicines. This is not appropriate. We're also seeing an increasing trend of sending emails and text messages, and those are illustrated on the right-hand side there, to customer bases of your business. I just want to be clear that customers do not stop being members of the public by virtue of having registered with your service or having received a particular treatment from your service. Proactive promotional contact about these prescription medicines is not appropriate. We also see evidence of promotion outside the terms of the marketing authorization, and while that is still promotion of a prescription medicine on the face of it, the harm that lies underneath it is of concern. So we see promotional messages about dosing flexibility and use of medicines in the women's health space, and that maps back to the quality standards that are required of an advertisement for a medicine, and again, a seeming deliberate attempt to tap into the consumer psyche as identified by the ASA's insightful research. Just to go offline for a moment, in-store activity still remains a problem as well. So on your premises, there are concerns about solicitation of members of the public in store being driven towards prescription-only medicines before consultation by use of posters and counter display materials. I'd also like to talk about the emerging problem that ISA have highlighted and our joint warning that's been issued has stated, and that is the drawing attention to products that do not yet have an authorization in the UK. And we have some investigations finalising in this area. And I want to say clearly that the creation of consumer demand through speculation and wait lists is wholly inappropriate for products that have not yet fully completed an assessment for safety, quality and efficacy, and for which, if they were authorised, would be subject to some sort of professional consultation before being dispensed. I'd also like to draw your attention to the threat of the black market at the moment of illegal products, which, linked with the consumer demand and interest in these medicines and consumer behaviour as highlighted by ASA, the activity here should not be fueling confusion amongst consumers about how to get appropriate treatment of licensed, safely assessed medicines. So what we're seeing in this space is similar to how licensed prescription medicines are being promoted: inappropriate emails to consumer bases, social media content. But I also just want to draw on an emerging concern as well that we've noticed through our active monitoring of media coverage of the weight loss space at the moment. And we are seeing comments from executive leaders of pharmacies who are commenting on the demand and the interest in the medicines and the speculation of how these will be used if licensed, and the problems that they may or may solve. Please take care with your media engagement work and your media liaison, and think carefully about the comments that may appear in the press subsequently. I just wanted to end with a why, so we don't get lost in the detail here of, is this word allowed, or can I say it like this? And just to take a step back about why this really matters. And there is a clear professional responsibility here to maintain trust in medicines and the healthcare system. The regulations exist to protect the public, particularly those that are considered to be most vulnerable in society. And again, I refer back to the ASA research there and the pockets of risk of harm with respect to messages about body image for certain members of society. There is also a real need to protect that professional consultation that may lead to the supply of a prescription medicine. Again, drawing attention to the consumer research, medicines are not ordinary commodities, and the ASA identified that the public considered many of these products to be lifestyle products in nature. So we need to swing the messaging right back to something that's much more appropriate for discussing a medicinal product amongst members of the public. With that wider context, I will hand over to colleagues at the General Pharmaceutical Council. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Claire. Just wait for me to get the control of the slides. Lovely, there we go. So good morning, everybody. I'm Kieran Jones, and I'm Head of Pharmacies Regulation at GPHC. Today I'm going to touch on two topics. So firstly, I'm going to talk about an issue which is very live at the moment in pharmacy. So for any of you that own a pharmacy or work in a pharmacy or are associated with a pharmacy, I'm hoping that'll be a helpful refresher. And then secondly, I'm going to talk about the GPHC's role in regulating advertisement, and particularly advertisement around weight management. So just a quick reminder of who we are and what we do. The GPHC regulates pharmacists, pharmacy technicians and pharmacy premises across Great Britain. And our job is to protect the public. So we promote and maintain the health, safety and well-being of the public by upholding standards and public trust in pharmacy. So as part of our role, we set standards and guidance for pharmacists and pharmacy technicians, and also for pharmacies, and they describe how safe and effective care should be delivered. We also investigate concerns about the people and the pharmacies that we register, and we take action to protect the public where that's required. And a key part of our role, and the part of the organisation that I work in, is inspection. So we inspect pharmacies to make sure that they're meeting our standards. So I just wanted to draw your attention to two key publications. We updated our guidance for pharmacies providing services online in February 2025. And we've recently published a thematic review. So that's covering off weight management services specifically, and contains a number of recommendations to improve practice in that sector. So both those publications make our expectations very clear, but they're also supportive publications, and they're designed to empower registrants and pharmacy owners to meet our standards by setting out what good practice looks like. So it's well worth having a look at those two if you haven't already. And the links to those will be circulated to everybody after the webinar. So in the last year, we've seen the proportion of online pharmacies meeting our standards has increased. So it was 72% in last year, 25-26, and it's now increased to 29% so far this year, which is great news. And that's broadly comparable to bricks and mortar pharmacies. The biggest area where we're still finding problems is with the independent verification of weight and height, or BMI. And this represents the third most frequently reported area of concern for online pharmacies. And it made up 11% of the total concerns we received last year. And of those, 72% were submitted by members of the public. So just a refresher of what we mean by independent verification. We expect the prescriber to independently verify weight, height, or BMI before the supply. And that could be via a video consultation, it could be an in-person assessment, by checking clinical records, or contacting another healthcare provider, such as the person's GP. We're very clear that you shouldn't solely rely on photos or pre-recorded videos to verify somebody's weight or BMI. For ongoing supplies, that might be appropriate, but only where the initial weight has been independently verified. If you can't verify that information, or if you can't verify somebody's medical history, then you should direct that person to an appropriate care provider for further assessment. And that includes verifying where somebody's declared a comorbidity, where treatment eligibility depends on that. Now we recognise that technology is advancing rapidly in this area, including the use of AI. GPHC is committed to working collaboratively with stakeholders and pharmacies to ensure that our guidance keeps pace with current best practice. We've also committed to regular review and update our inspection decision-making framework in light of future developments in this area. So some examples of good practice. So where pharmacies most often meet our standards, they take a graded approach to assessing risks. So what do we mean by a graded approach? We mean not one size fits all for the patient, and different patient pathways based on different levels of risk. So it might be if you're treating a patient in England and you have access to the National Care Record, that patient goes down a different pathway to somebody, for example, who might live in Scotland or Wales, where that information isn't available. Where people meet our standards, they also have different approaches for the first consultation versus any subsequent consultation. So putting in really robust checks at the very beginning of the patient journey, and then making sure that as the patient progresses with treatment, that monitoring is carried out. And also important to flag up, I've already mentioned around AI, but we expect that pharmacies do their own audits of AI outputs rather than relying on what the developer claims any piece of AI software or tool can do. And that's really important to ensure that those tools work for your specific patient population and your operating model. So moving on specifically to the GPHC's role in regulating advertising. So where pharmacies fail to comply with advertising law, our inspectors might find that the standards for registered pharmacies haven't been met. And inappropriate advertising can be an indicator of poor governance, unsafe service delivery, and ultimately a breach of the registered pharmacy standards. And as other colleagues have said, that's particularly where the promotion of a prescription-only medicine is driving patient demand instead of a clinical assessment. And just as a reminder, Principle 1 in our standards is around the governance arrangement, so ensuring they safeguard the health, safety and well-being of patients and the public. And Principle 4 of our standards is around the way in which pharmacy services are delivered and making sure that they're delivered in a way which safeguards the health, safety and well-being of patients and the public. So thinking now about individuals, inappropriate advertising could engage our fitness to practice function if a registrant has approved, enabled or failed to challenge unlawful or misleading advertising. That could raise concerns about their judgment professionalism, leadership, or patient safety and public confidence. Additionally, superintendent pharmacists have an extra duty to secure the business is at all times carried on in ways that ensure its safe and effective running so far as concerns the supply of medicinal products. So the superintendent must be a senior manager with authority over decisions affecting medicine sale and supply, and therefore inappropriate POM advertising may indicate a failure of governance and control over medicine-related commercial activity. We also recognise that there are fake websites out there purporting to be pharmacies, and they are continuing to advertise inappropriately. We've recently been raising awareness of this issue on social media, and we've run a campaign on our website to educate the public about how to check whether pharmacies are legitimate and properly registered. We want to work with legitimate pharmacy owners on our shared objective of keeping patients safe and promoting legitimate pharmacies. And I've seen there's some questions in the QA about the commercial pressure, and there is a commercial disadvantage sometimes if you follow the rules. What I would say is this is a really good opportunity to promote your service as legitimate and trusted by ensuring that you're sticking to the advertising rules and ensuring together that patients and the public are not driven to fake websites. Thank you very much. I'm now going to hand back to Jess, who's going to open up for the question and answer session.
Thanks so much, Kieran. Excuse me. And I hope everyone has found this really useful so far. Just to say, we've had a lot of questions. We've answered a small number in the chat where we can, but we can't possibly get through all of them. So we will be following up afterwards thematically to try and ensure that we're answering as much as possible. But just to get into the questions. So a big theme that was coming through in the Q&A is around enforcement, compliance and a level playing field. One question said that for businesses that invest heavily in compliance, there can be a genuine commercial disadvantage when competitors run non-compliant campaigns for weeks or months and acquire customers before the advertising is eventually withdrawn. So this is a question, I think, for all the panelists. How can we ensure that we are being proactive and we are working together to ensure that our enforcement is effective? And how are we going about that in practice? In brief, Andrew, do you want to speak to that first?
Yeah, I mean, look, we recognise that this is a challenging and rapidly evolving area. I mean, since 2024, the ASA and CAP have taken a proactive approach, trying to engage with the industry and updating our guidance and identifying problematic ads for our own active ad monitoring system, rather than simply waiting and relying on complaints to come in. We have seen positive changes across the sector, particularly in reducing references to name POMs in ads, which at one point was very prevalent and which you hardly see at all now. However, we recognise the challenges remain, especially following the introduction of oral GLP-1s recently. Alongside enforcement, we've continued to work closely with the industry through events such as forums hosted by DICE, Digital Clinical Excellence Network, as well as webinars like today's session to try and help advertisers understand the rules and get their advertising right before compliance becomes necessary. But if you are seeing advertisers, if you are seeing problematic ads, please do refer these over to us, either for investigations or for our own intel. It would be very useful.
Thanks, Andrew. Claire, is there anything you'd like to add to that from an MHRA perspective?
Thanks, Jess. From an MHRA perspective, we're working really hard to tackle this problem. I think all the joint work that is going on between ourselves, the ASA and the GPHC to proactively try and get those messages out there has been really important, and we will continue to do that. In terms of investigation of complaints, I would probably say it's obviously a very difficult area at the moment, and if you do have a Read a File Blue guide, you'll see that advertisers have the right to a thorough and fair process when any concerns are expressed that something may have gone wrong, and that involves inviting representations from those advertisers to explain what may or may not have happened. And at that stage, we would hopefully seek to get some voluntary agreements to correct any advertising that we have concerns about to improve compliance going forward. I will echo what Andrew says. It is a complex space. There are lots of novel and new methods of promotion being deployed. And I think in the area of weight loss, it is unprecedented. There can be a range of breaches invoked, and they may differ each time, and we have to look at each case on its own merits. What I would say is to try and impress upon the advertisers the responsibility to comply, coming back to the wording of the law. It's your responsibility, and don't wait to receive a complaint. As Kieran said, trust your integrity, trust your provision of an excellent service and a promotion of that service. We will not hesitate to invoke any statutory powers should the need be, but we're committed to working with advertisers in the voluntary space to try and get this right as all the advertising evolves. Thanks, Jess.
Thanks, Claire. And Kieran, anything you'd like to add from a GPHC perspective on that enforcement piece?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So just briefly, as other colleagues have said, we really value our close working relationship with other regulators. And, it's clear that in this space, there are several different sets of rules and regulations that we're working to, and there's a crossover between those. So that joint working is essential. I think what I'd say is, we get lots of questions around why haven't you taken action, or why haven't you enforced against a particular advert or a particular pharmacy? And just to remind people that our enforcement approach is graded and stepwise, and we want to use the least restrictive intervention that we can to get compliance. And sometimes that could just be an inspector having a conversation with a superintendent pharmacist, for example, who might not have been aware that a particular advert had been placed. Sometimes it requires us to take enforcement action through inspection. And just recently, in the last sort of 18 months, we've had 22 inspections where we've had a standards not met outcome, and a further 16 which have had areas for improvement, and they're all specific to weight management services. We've also had to issue 2 improvement notices and impose 9 sets of conditions on pharmacies who are providing weight management services. So what I would say is we are taking action, but we're doing that in a graded and proportionate way. And we really value that close working relationship where people perhaps aren't engaging with the other regulators, where they're perhaps not engaging with the ASA. Then as a statutory regulator, that's where we would be looking to step in.
Thanks, Kieran. Yeah, I think that's a really important point, that there is a huge amount of work going on here, and lots of it is visible, but not all of it will be. Moving on now, so I was going to direct this question at you, Andrew. So there's questions around mentioning pills or featuring tablet imagery in ads. So yeah, one question is mentioning pills, for example, if it says weight loss treatment in a once-a-day pill within the ad image and caption, is that likely to be compliant or not? How would the ASA approach that?
So I suppose, just to reiterate what I said earlier, the recent licensing of the pills hasn't changed the underlying rules. The recent joint enforcement warning it made it clear that references to products by name or by using words such as the GLP-1 tablets or oral GLP-1s, or even the new weight loss tablet, is likely to breach the code, because consumers are likely to understand those as references to promoting a POM. I mean, more generally, I'm not going to prejudge anything now, but we would assess the overall impression of an ad. However, I think it's worth remembering we have previously ruled on injections. The ASA, in a number of rulings, we said the ASA understood that all forms of injectable weight loss medicines were POMs. Therefore, a reference to an injection, a weight loss injection, was likely to be understood as a POM. Similarly, if there are only once daily weight loss pills on the market are POMs, I'd imagine our rulings would come to a similar conclusion.
Thanks, Andrew. So yeah, sort of similar considerations of factors that we've taken into account in previous cases, but obviously applying them to a slightly different context now. I was going to direct this next area to you, Claire. So there were a couple of questions around how businesses can educate consumers. So how are regulators addressing the issue of allowing potential customers access to information and education on medicated weight loss so that they can make informed choices? They go on to say the demand will continue regardless, and there is a reverse risk that these regulations are not allowing consumers to educate themselves.
Yes, thank you, Jess. It's an interesting question, and it's not something new, of course, patients wanting to access factual and balanced information about medicinal products to support their own health and to support a really good quality conversation with a healthcare professional. There is a whole chapter in the Blue Guide that's dedicated to compliantly providing the public with non-promotional information about prescription-only medicines. So do have a look at that and a supporting appendix as well. So I think that's about consumers choosing to access factual and balanced information. I think what we're talking about today and the problems we're seeing is something different. If you think about those three constructs of design to promote, it's looking at things being proactively pushed out to an audience which is leading down an inevitable path towards prescription-only medicines, backed up by obviously the really insightful research from ASA as to how those messages are landing. What I would say is have a look at the pharmaceutical industry and the manufacturers of these medicines and the Association of the British Pharmaceutical Industries Code of Practice. Pharmaceutical industry has been issuing non-promotional information to patients for decades, and they have a distinct code through which they can do that and a really safe framework. So that's a good model of how patients can receive information without being promoted to.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Claire. Now a question for you, Kieran. So does GPHC take the view that pharmacy owners / superintendent pharmacists should have oversight of how weight loss services are advertised to the public? And do you think this is happening at the moment?
Yeah, thanks, Jess. So I may have answered a similar question already in the chat. In short, the answer is yes. We do expect pharmacy owners, so owners are responsible for meeting our standards for registered pharmacies, and therefore we expect under Principle 1 and Principle 4 that they are aware of their advertising and that it's compliant, and therefore that they're meeting our premises standards. We also expect superintendent pharmacists to be able to discharge their responsibility, and again, I read all the detailed wording from the Medicines Act out when I gave my section of the presentation. And ultimately, as I've said, where we find that that pharmacies are not doing that, that could lead to a breach of our standards for the premises, but it could also mean that we take action or investigate any registrants that were involved in either approving or not removing those advertisements.
Brilliant. Thanks so much, Kieran. Back to you, Claire, if that's okay. There was a question, why are wait lists considered a breach of the HMRs / CAP code? There isn't a reference in the Blue Guide, HMRs or CAP code to the word wait list. So are you able to say a little bit more about that?
I think with the wait lists, obviously they're drawing attention to a medicine that doesn't have a UK marketing authorisation at the moment. So Chapter 4 of the Blue Guide outlines a wider framework for an absolute prohibition on the promotion of medicinal product that doesn't have a marketing authorisation to anyone, not just members of the public. And it's about safeguarding the fact that that medicine is not available in this country, is potentially undergoing licensing assessment for safety, quality and efficacy. And it's not appropriate to talk about those products in a promotional way that invites a consumer to join a wait list for it. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's mapping to that absolute prohibition on promoting a medicine that doesn't have an authorization yet in this country, and the inappropriateness of speculating about what it's going to be used for and how good or otherwise it's going to be.
Thanks, Claire. I was going to try and sneak in one more question, but it looks like we've reached the end. So I'm really sorry to those of you where we haven't answered your questions. But as I say, we will be following up. So we'll look at the themes that are raised and address those with you. Thank you so much to all our panelists today and to all of you who took the time to come along. I really hope you found it a useful session, and we will be following up with the slides, recording and further resources for you. So have a lovely day, everyone. Thanks for coming along.